to unmute your microphone and join me in the pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much for that. All public comment will occur during citizen communication except for public hearings. Persons who registered to speak under multiple items will be allowed to speak multiple times. Does anybody on council wish to change that policy? Seeing no request to do so, we'll move on to citizen communication. Per council policy, citizen communication is the time on our agenda for the public to address council on business and affairs of the city. The city council is not able to hear any comments at this time on land use matters that are before or may become before council. Please reserve such comments for the appropriate public hearing. As a reminder, we take your comments seriously, but do not generally respond to comments until later in the evening. Council must wait until administrative council business to take action in response to citizen communication. Council members can ask questions of speakers if desired. The city needed advanced registration in order to participate in citizen communication for this meeting. If you're currently in this meeting to speak during citizen communication, please listen for me to call your name and the clerk will unmute you so you may begin. If you do not respond or are disconnected, you may miss your chance to comment. Please give your name and address for the record and keep your comments limited to 3 minutes. If a council member wants to ask a question, please ask to be recognized when the speaker is finished. Thank you. We have one speaker this evening, David Bondarchuk.
David, you should be able to unmute yourself and you'll have 3 minutes once you begin.
Okay, thank you for allowing me this evening to speak. My name is David Bondarchuk and I reside at 15392 East 117th Avenue in Commerce City, Colorado. I've resided here for 13 years and I don't think it's any surprise to either of the members of the board here this evening that I'm a little upset on a recent policy that was passed. You know, I've been here for 13 years and I've been a silent citizen and apparently that was a mistake. Shame on you, Commerce City. Shame on you for Ordinance 2318. I received a citation for absolutely nothing. You hurt me, an innocent person. So since you guys don't know how to govern, I decided to school you all this evening. So get your pens and papers out because this is my little school on local government. First off, the police need more money. First off, because quite frankly, they don't get paid enough to deal with people like me. We need to clean the weeds up in the city park behind my house where you have refused to allow me to have a privacy fence on the backside of my own property. You need to allow residents that want privacy fences to have privacy fences. I ask that you alter City Ordinance 2318 to allow up to 4 days of parking for personal vehicles such as food trucks, because currently that's not in the statute and it's hurting people like me. I understand what you're trying to do, but you're hurting people like me. We also need a stoplight just north of 104th and Chambers at the exit of the King Supers. With the opening businesses on the adjacent side of the street, that has become a very dangerous intersection, and that light needs to be installed and addressed. Also, there is an issue with the city water. It is absolutely disgusting and undrinkable. They say they're putting in a softener, this, that, or whatever. I think there needs to be a third-party city oversight committee that oversees the testing of the water, because quite frankly, what's coming out of my taps, ruining my pipes, ruining my appliances is disgusting, and I shouldn't have to pay for it. So quite frankly, those are the issues of the community, not a food truck that's been parked for less than 2 days awaiting a plumber to install an emergency water pump. How dare you, Commerce City? Shame on you for hurting people like me and passing Ordinance 2318. You all are despicable. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Bondarchuk? Seeing none, we thank you for your time this evening, sir. If follow-up is necessary, you should expect to be contacted by a staff member. Members of the public were also able to submit comments online and by mail. No written comments were received by the deadline. If anyone wishes to speak at future council meeting, please check the meeting agenda and city website for information on how to register or submit written comments. Next on our agenda are proclamations. We have a proclamation declaring April 2021 as Sexual Assault Awareness Month in Commerce City. Will the city clerk please read the proclamation?
Whereas every day women, men, and children across Colorado suffer the pain and trauma of rape, sexual assault, and sexual harassment, and whereas this crime occurs far too frequently, goes underreported far too often, and leaves long-lasting physical and emotional scars, and whereas rape, sexual assault, and sexual harassment impact citizens in Commerce City regardless of age, race, or gender, and whereas the Commerce City Police Department as a certified You Have Options agency remains committed to offering reporting options to victims of sexual assault while responding to sexual violence with a victim-centered, offender-focused approach, and whereas the Commerce City Police Department has continued their commitment to supporting victims and bringing perpetrators to justice with the Sexual Assault Task Force with the Brighton Police Department, bringing with it a high level of investigation response to victims in our community, and whereas during National Sexual Assault Awareness Month, we recommit ourselves to not only lifting the veil of secrecy and shame surrounding sexual violence, but also to raise awareness, expanding support for victims, and strengthening our response, and whereas we share the responsibility for supporting victims by believing friends, family, and coworkers when it does occur, and bringing perpetrators to justice, whatever justice means to those who are victimized, and whereas at the local level, we must work together to educate the Commerce City community about sexual violence prevention, supporting survivors, and speaking out against harmful attitudes and actions, and whereas prevention is possible when the entire Commerce City community is involved, the first step is increasing awareness through education and supporting victims. It's time for all of us to join advocates and communities across the country in taking action to prevent sexual violence, and now therefore I, Benjamin Hughson, Mayor of the Commerce City, on behalf of the City Council, do hereby proclaim April 2021 as Sexual Assault Awareness Month in Commerce City.
Thank you, sir. I'm looking for a motion and a second to approve the proclamation. Mayor Pro Tem.
I motion to accept the proclamation.
Councilmember Alan Thomas.
I second it.
I have a motion and a second to approve the proclamation declaring April 2021 as Sexual Assault Awareness Month in Commerce City. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we'll do a voice vote. Please use your physical hands in the chat window so your vote can be counted. And that is going to pass unanimously. Next, we have a proclamation declaring April 18th to the 24th, 2021 as National Crime Victims' Rights Week in Commerce City. Will the city clerk please read the proclamation?
Whereas the victims' rights movement has resulted in the passage of laws at the local, state, and federal levels that establish essential rights for victims, whereas Crime Victims' Rights Acts passed here in Colorado and at the federal level have provided victims with ways to participate meaningfully throughout the criminal justice process, whereas the rights of crime victims are best protected when all participants in the criminal justice process, not only victims, are appropriately educated about victims' rights, whereas supporting victims of crime is crucial to the U.S. justice system because our support honors the experience of victims and allows them to find autonomy and empowerment through achieving self-defined goals, whereas we must help victims access the justice, assistance, and support they need to rebuild their lives, whereas advocacy by and for victims of crime is itself a form of seeking justice, no less than justice sought in the courts, whereas the accomplishments of victims' rights movements achieved through compassion and collaboration and built on the courageous advocacy of individual victims and their families across the country inspire us in hope for future progress and greater healing, whereas we are determined to respond to crime and violence by helping victims find not only support, recovery, and justice, but also a sense of hope for their future, whereas Commerce City is hereby dedicated to strengthening victims and survivors in the aftermath of crime, building resilience in our communities and our victim service providers, and bringing hope and healing to all victims and survivors. Now therefore I, Benjamin Hughson, Mayor of Commerce City, on behalf of the City Council, do hereby proclaim the week of April 18th through the 24th, 2021 as Crime Victims' Rights Week, reaffirming Commerce City's commitment to creating a victim service and criminal justice response that assists all victims of crime during Crime Victims' Rights Week and throughout the year, and expressing our sincere gratitude and appreciation for those community members, victim service providers, and criminal justice professionals who are committed to improving our response to all victims of crime so that they may find relevant assistance, support, justice, and peace.
Thank you. I'm looking for a motion and a second to approve the proclamation. Mayor Pro Tem,
Motion to approve the proclamation.
Councilmember Noble.
I'll second that.
I have a motion and a second to approve the proclamation declaring April 18th to the 24th, 2021 as National Crime Victims' Rights Week in Commerce City. Is there any discussion? Seeing no request for discussion, we'll do a voice vote. Please use physical show of hands. And that is going to pass unanimously. And next we have a proclamation declaring April 2021 as Child Abuse Prevention Month in Commerce City. Will the city clerk please read the proclamation?
Whereas Commerce City has dedicated individuals and organizations who work daily to counter the problem of child abuse and to help parents obtain the assistance they need. Whereas our community is stronger when all citizens become aware of child abuse prevention and become involved in supporting parents to raise their children in a safe and nurturing environment. Whereas effective child abuse prevention programs such as Ralston House and CASA of Adams and Broomfield counties succeed because of partnerships among families, social service agencies, schools, religious and civic organizations, law enforcement agencies, and the business community. Whereas all citizens, community agencies, faith organizations, and businesses will work to increase their efforts to support families. Now therefore I, Benjamin Huseman, Mayor of Commerce City, on behalf of the City Council, do hereby proclaim the month of April 2021 as Child Abuse Prevention Month, renewing our commitment to preventing child abuse and learning what we can do to promote the safety and well-being of children.
Thank you. Looking for a motion and a second to approve the proclamation. Councilmember Alan Thomas,
So moved.
Councilmember Noble.
I'll second that.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second to approve the proclamation declaring April 2021 as Child Abuse Prevention Month in Commerce City. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we'll do a voice vote. Please use physical hands in the chat window. And that is going to pass 8-1 with Councilmember Madera voting no. Was that a yes? Okay, that'll be 9-0 with unanimous. Before I move on from proclamation, I do want to inquire, back in March, we approved a proclamation for it to be recognizing Women's History Month in Commerce City, but I never saw that proclamation come through.
Mayor Huseman, I drafted that proclamation. If I fail to send that out, that's on me, and I'll send that out right now. But that was drafted, and the city seal and your signature placed on that.
Thank you. Next up, we have presentations. I would like to invite Interim City Manager Roger Tinklenberg to provide an update on the city's overall response to the COVID-19 crisis.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple items. One is, sorry, I need to read this off my screen so I don't get this messed up. So back on April 16, the governor issued basically the new COVID-19 dial, and that was followed up by CDPHE, which is the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, basically allowing the health order issued by them to expire. They allowed those guidelines to expire, and that basically allows each county to set their own guidance for their citizens. So in our case, it's Tri-County Health, because they're the health department for Adams County. And so their health order is in effect through May 15. And it's likely that that will be extended, I would imagine. I haven't been able to participate in their most recent meeting, but I believe that will be the case. And so we just need to continue mask wearing here in Adams County. And then the other item is that Adams County, in partnership with Commerce City, or Commerce City in partnership with Adams County, whichever way you want it, we have launched the Emergency Rental Assistance Program. And I'll talk about that a little bit more later on in the city manager update. But just to give you a sneak preview, we have 50 applications already that are being reviewed. So that's it for guidelines. In terms of our facilities, we're continuing at our current status for now. So that's the update. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tinklenberg. Does anyone on council have any questions for Mr. Tinklenberg regarding the COVID-19 update? Seeing no request, we will move on to the next agenda item, which is the consent agenda. The consent agenda includes items that are routine, procedural, informational, self-explanatory, and non-controversial. They are presented to council for a single motion and vote. Any member of council may ask to remove a specific item for further discussion and a separate vote. Tonight, there are 7 items listed under the consent agenda. Does anyone on council wish to remove an item off the consent agenda for further discussion? Seeing no request to do so, I need a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Councilmember Alan Thomas,
So moved.
Mayor Pro Tem.
A second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Is there any request for discussion? Mayor Pro Tem.
I apologize.
Seeing no request for discussion, will the city clerk please read the titles and take a roll call vote?
Minutes of April 5th, 2021. Ordinance 2323, an ordinance amending the 2021 budget of the City of Commerce City, Colorado by the recognition of the Adams County Open Space Grant Funds in the amount of $92,500 for the Turnberry Park Skate Spot project and the authorization of the expenditure thereof. Ordinance 2324, an ordinance amending the 2021 budget of the City of Commerce City, Colorado by appropriating $301,900 from the general fund to cover expenses relating to the environmental consulting services contract and authorization of the expenditure thereof. Ordinance 2268, an ordinance amending sections 3-2304 and 6-2012, consolidating sections 6-2012 and 6-2013, and repealing and saving section 6-2013 of the Commerce City Revised Municipal Code to modify responsibilities and standards for the maintenance of weeds and grasses and increasing penalties for noncompliance. Resolution 2021-29, resolution amending council policies relating to meeting procedures and council conduct and travel. Resolution 2021-30, resolution appointing members to designated boards and commissions of Commerce City. Resolution 2021-32, resolution renaming the Commerce City Diversity and Inclusion Commission as the Commerce City Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Commission. Councilmember Madera.
Yes.
Councilmember Alan Thomas.
Yes.
Councilmember Noble.
Yes.
Councilmember Wardiola.
Yes.
Councilmember Hurst.
Yes.
Councilmember Grimes.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Frank.
Yes.
Mayor Huseman.
Yes.
Passes 9-0.
Thank you very much. Next, we will move on to resolutions. First up is Resolution 2021-21, purchase of property interest necessary for the Rosemary Street widening project. Would like to invite Brent Soderlin, city engineer, to introduce the presentation.
Dylan, could you hear me?
Yes, we can, Brent. Do you need us to pull up the presentation?
Yes, please, Dylan. And can you bring Amy and Greg on? Oh, I see they're on. Okay, thank you. All right. Good evening, Honorable Mayor and members of City Council. Tonight we will be presenting the Rosemary Street widening project. Can you go to the next slide, please, Dylan? The presentation tonight will be a brief synopsis of the project costs, the timeline, overview of the right-of-way needs and right-of-way costs. The design plans right now are currently at 90%. And really the next step for the project is a purchase of right-of-way, permanent easements, and temporary construction easements. Helping me to present tonight are Amy Backel, project engineer with EST, and Greg Jameson, Senior Right-of-Way Manager with HDR. I'm now going to turn the presentation over to Amy, and she's going to provide an overview of the project.
Good evening, everyone.
As Brent said, I'm Amy. I'm the consultant project manager for EST. Can we go to the next slide? Perfect. So the Rosemary Street project extends from 81st Place to 86th Avenue. And this corridor currently has one lane each direction. It has no sidewalks and no drainage infrastructure, but it sees really high traffic volumes in the AM and the PM peaks. And it's really a main thoroughfare for the Irondale neighborhood. So on the south side of the project, Rosemary is already widened to 4 lanes. And so we start there at 81st Place, and we're going to transition to a 3-lane section, 1 lane each direction and a center 2-way left turn lane. So with the number of driveways and business accesses along Rosemary, the center 2-way left turn lane is where we're going to get that improved traffic flow. This project ties in with 88th Avenue that's currently under design as well. But an important distinction is that the Rosemary and 88th Avenue intersection, where a lot of the backups along both corridors are caused, that intersection is going to be improved with 88th Avenue. So because we need a dual left turn lane, you can only have 2 turn lanes if you have 2 receiving lanes, and that receiving lane would be done with 88th. So next slide, please. Perfect. This is our typical section. So if you're driving northbound on our new Rosemary Street, this is what it's going to look like. We have corridor lighting. We have a sidewalk on the west side, multi-use path on the east side. And this path is going to connect down to the Rocky Mountain Arsenal. So a little bit of bike and ped connectivity as part of the project. You can see our 3 lanes and our center 2-way left turn lane, as well as curb and gutter that's going to put in underground storm sewer system. Next slide. Okay, our project cost. Our design budget is 1.1 million, and we're going to come in under budget on that portion. Our right-of-way is estimated at 402,000 currently, and the construction estimate is 4.8 million for a total of 6.3. Next slide. All right, we started design in early 2020. We finished the 90% submittal in the winter of 2020. And now we are here in 2021. So the utilities, Excel and CenturyLink are designing their relocations, and we're ready to start acquiring right away. If everything goes smoothly, we'll advertise to contractors this fall and put that first shovel in the ground early 2022. Are there any questions on the overview portion of the project for me? Well, I will turn it over to Greg Jameson if he is on. He's going to take us through how this right-of-way is going to go smoothly and efficiently.
Okay, next slide, please. Just a little bit about myself. Greg Jameson, I'm a senior right-of-way manager for HDR. We're sub-consultants to Amy's firm EST on the project. I've got over 25 years of experience purchasing right-of-way for government transportation projects. Been with HDR for 7 years, and I was with CDOT for 15 years prior to that as a right-of-way manager for the Fulton District. So, quick overview of the right-of-way acquisition needed for this project. 40 right-of-way parcels are needed from 27 owners. As indicated by the color coding, we have 9 right-of-way parcels, 4 permanent easements, 27 construction easements for 2.12 acres total property affected, and I'm going to explain what each of these different types of right-of-way parcels are in the coming slides. So next slide, please. A right-of-way parcel is a parcel where the city acquires 100% of the ownership of the parcel. Right-of-way parcels are acquired for roadway widening and sidewalk whenever permanent irrevocable hardscape is going to be placed on the property. The city will want to own 100% of the ownership. The legal term for this is a fee simple parcel. Next slide, please. 4 permanent easements will be needed. A permanent easement is a kind of a parcel where the city acquires a right to use a parcel for a certain purpose. The landowner continues to own the underlying ground, and the landowner can use the property for whatever purpose it wants to, as long as that use does not interfere with the city's use. Permanent easements mainly on this project are for subsurface storm sewer. So they would be for, the purpose would be for the construction, use, and maintenance of some subsurface storm sewer. As Amy indicated, this project will greatly improve the drainage on Rosemary, and there's 2 subsurface storm sewer pipes that will feed 2 water quality ponds on the project. Next slide, please. The last type of parcel is a temporary easement. Temporary easement is the city acquires the right for its contractor to enter a parcel to construct the project. It's just rental of this property for a certain period of time to occupy to build the project. Temporary easements are situations where if the contractor disturbs anything in that parcel, they need to return it to as reasonable as to the condition it was in prior to their entry. A classic example of the need for temporary easements on this project is since the project's going to widen, driveways will need to be chased out to catch grade, and temporary easements are used for that purpose, in addition to longitudinal temporary easements to construct the improvements needed. Next slide, please. These are slides of the right-of-way plans, just showing the acquisitions that will be needed for the project. This is the south end of the project. As you can see, it's mainly temporary easements in this area. The project improvements can largely be constructed within existing right-of-way. The temporary easements are just needed for contractor access to build the improvements. Next slide, please. This is the middle of the project. We have pink right-of-way parcels here in areas where roadway widening and sidewalk will be installed. Again, some temporary easements, and this here's the first indication of our permanent easement for the buried storm sewer that will run out to the water quality pond, the first water quality pond. Next slide, please. The north end of the project, on the east side, we'll have right-of-way parcels needed to construct the roadway and sidewalk and some temporary easements, and then the again, a permanent easement for subsurface pipe to pipe the storm sewer to a water quality pond. Next slide. So the right-of-way process that we'll undertake for this project is we'll send landowners a notice of intent to acquire. This notice formally advises them of the start of the right-of-way acquisition process. Then we'll determine the fair market value of all the parcels to be acquired and make formal offers to acquire on behalf of the city, do a negotiation, and hopefully the negotiation results in a signed agreement. And then a closing occurs where we pay the landowners the amount agreed to, and they sign the instruments conveying the parcels needed. Our staff at HDR, we have 16 very experienced real estate specialists, and we have, in addition to myself, 4 other specialists assigned to this project. We're highlighting Claudia Lopez here as one of the right-of-way agents that will be working on this project. Because Claudia is a native Spanish speaker, she actually speaks Spanish, French, Portuguese, and English. That was her college degree was in Cuba, in her native Cuba was French, Portuguese, and English. And Claudia is very effective working with the Hispanic community and has worked effectively with the Hispanic community on past Commerce City projects. She also speaks real estate. Over my years of experience, one thing that I've found is when we need interpreters to interpret to whatever the language may be, Korean, Vietnamese, a lot of times real estate, we need to understand the cultural construct of how real estate acquisition occurs in the native country. And it's important to have the interpreters understand our terms so that they can kind of explain that in the context of the culture in which we're in. But the advantage of having Claudia on the team is not only does she speak Spanish, but she is an established real estate specialist, so she can explain our kind of unique terminology to this community. Next slide, please. Finally, you know, it's never happy news when the government is going to acquire a portion of your property for a capital improvement project. We always treat people with dignity and respect to make sure that they're offered fair market value, and try to work as constructively with them as possible. But we've worked with the city with city staff to develop a right-of-way incentive program for this project. Right-of-way incentive programs are kind of a recent right-of-way development, but they've taken hold really all over the state. A lot of our clients use the right-of-way incentive programs on a lot of the projects that we've used across Colorado. What a right-of-way incentive program is, it's a situation where you offer an additional amount. You offer, you know, the fair market value of the property, and then you offer an additional bonus amount if the landowner signs an agreement within 30 days of the offer. We've had a lot of success with these programs. They significantly reduce the time required to purchase right away. They reduce administration, acquisition, and legal costs. One of the goals of FHWA when they first developed incentive programs for federal aid projects was to minimize the need for eminent domain on highway projects, and I've really seen that to be the case. And then finally, they just create goodwill with the constituents. Again, you know, building the trust with the folks that we're purchasing the property with is important. But when there's some additional money out there, that certainly helps. That certainly helps the process. We've done this all over the state. In a recent metro area project, we acquired right away from 50 property owners within 2 months with no condemnations on a project where a really nice incentive program was developed for that project. Next slide, please. So the overall estimated right-of-way costs, fair market value for the parcels to be acquired is $335,000. The incentive adds $67,000 to the overall costs, making it $402,000. And the incentive is, you know, we always add a contingency over the estimated fair market value cost of the right of way, because it's common to schedule to settle with landowners for more than you offer. And the additional $67,000 here is consistent with that additional money that we've found on other projects. Next slide. So any questions?
Any questions from council regarding this item? Seeing none, thank you very much for your presentation. This time I'm looking for a motion and a second to adopt resolution 2021-21. Councilmember Grimes.
So moved.
Mayor Pro Tem.
I'll second.
Have a motion and a second to adopt resolution 2021-21. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, will the city clerk please read the title?
Resolution 2021-21, a resolution authorizing negotiation for and purchase of certain real property interests necessary for the Rosemary Street widening project.
And we will do a voice vote. Please use your physical hands in the chat window so your vote can be counted. And that is going to pass unanimously 9-0. Thank you very much. And next we have resolution 2021-31, a waiver of service plan requirements relating to debt issuance for Legato Metropolitan District. Will Robert Sheasley, our city attorney, please introduce the item and the applicant's representatives?
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I am here to briefly introduce this item tonight. As you may remember, in 2020, the City Council approved a consolidated service plan for the Legato Metropolitan Districts, numbers 1 through 7, which is on the east side of Tower Road, just north of the Republic Services facility. And then In that service plan at the time, a new provision was included requiring that the district, before any debt issuance or refinancing, provide the city with certain financial documents 60 days before any debt issuance or refinancing, with the intent being that the city would then be able to comment on the debt issuance and the terms thereof within that 60 days. We have a request tonight from the Legato districts to waive that requirement of submitting all of the information required there for a number of reasons. And staff is recommending approval of the waiver, as Legato in their request in the packet has provided nearly all the details of the debt issuance, aside from a statement and the opinion of bond counsel as part of that request. So the city has it. Some of the materials could not be provided actually within 60 days before the debt issuance, based on how the underwriting process works. And the applicant has their counsel and underwriter available to speak to us tonight. The additional information could be provided at the time of the debt issuance. Ultimately, the city could not deny or modify the debt issuance terms. And as the applicant will state, the current interest rate situation is very favorable, and so they want to take advantage of that to the benefit of future property owners. And they are seeking to advance during the appropriate construction weather this year, public infrastructure construction that will lead to both residential and commercial development in the property. As outlined in the packet, the current debt issuance will be done by an authority formed by the districts. And the debt issuance is for an amount that is about a third of the overall authorized debt under the limit in the consolidated service plan, which is $100 million, and they're seeking about $32 million in debt here at various interest rates. And so I'm happy to answer any questions, but I want to invite Megan Murphy and Shelby Turner, if we could bring them into the meeting to comment on behalf of the districts and authority.
Evening, Mayor and council members. Megan Murphy from the firm White Bear Ankley, Tanaka and Waldron on behalf of the Legato districts, along with Shelby Turner from Piper Sandler, who's the underwriter. Be happy to answer any specific questions you might have, or I can give you a brief kind of spiel similar to Robert's. How would you prefer to proceed?
Does anyone on council have any questions at this time? Does council wish to proceed with the presentation from Ms. Murphy? Councilmember Noble.
Ms. Murphy, I think the only question that I have, because sometimes we run into issues with developers and metro districts, is that shaving corners at this stage, sort of right off the bat, it sort of makes me anxious. And I could certainly understand why you're trying to get the lowest possible interest rate. And it does seem like interest rates could easily start going up in the near future. But at the same time, as I said, I'm a little anxious about this. And if you could relieve my anxiety about why it's necessary to cut corners on a very simple rule about the 60 days, it would be helpful.
Thank you, Councilmember Noble, and I'll just say I don't have any interest in cutting corners. My interests are in representing our clients to the best of our ability. So to that effect, the service plan has somewhat ambiguous language that says we need to provide you a final preliminary limited offering memorandum. And then we need to wait 60 days to hear from you, to hear what you think about that. As Mr. Sheasley said, you can comment, but you can't approve or deny. The fear is that by the time we could finalize the document to provide it to you, and then wait 60 days, the investors and the market would change, because the information in the PLOM, the preliminary limited offering memorandum, is based on information from about a month prior. So we would be 3 months behind on information. And the request tonight is to waive the requirement for the 60 days. Not that we don't want to provide you the preliminary limited offering memorandum. We'll provide that to you along with the opinion of bond counsel. It's the timing of when that's provided. We don't intend to not provide you with anything you ask. As always, we're here to cooperate and work with you as our governing jurisdiction. But we simply can't wait, and the market can't wait 60 days based on old information to then close the bond issuance. So our intention isn't to not provide or cut corners, it's to speed up the process so we can issue debt sooner. And as a reminder, this debt isn't going to repay any developers. It's going straight to constructing public improvements through the authority through a public bid process. So there won't be a developer that is getting money in their pocket sooner if you approve this. What will actually happen is the authority can hire grading and paving people sooner to build streets sooner in a time of year when it's good to build streets, instead of a time of year when it's cold and maybe not so good to build streets.
Just for my education then, is it difficult typically to meet the 60-day deadline? Is it unusual because of the market, or is this something difficult that's to accomplish?
I'll say something briefly and then turn it over to Shelby as the underwriter. It is somewhat unclear to us whether a draft PLOM would be appropriate. So we have a draft document, but it has a lot of blanks in it. It's not clear if that meets your service plan. So if we have to wait for a final document, then wait 60 days, that is very unusual and not possible with the way Metro District financing works. And I'll turn it over to Shelby to talk to you more about that.
Sure. Thanks, Megan. Hi, everyone. So I'm Shelby Turner. I'm with Piper Sandler, the underwriter for the transaction. So a typical transaction, as Megan mentioned, we update this preliminary limited offering memorandum with all relevant data provided from the developer. So that is current status of any contracts that the developer might have, any entitlement and platting language that has been approved by Commerce City and others. And so that is all included into the offering document, as well as different risk factors, like COVID risk factors are updated. All of that is very current information. And typically we have a cutoff date probably a week before, and then we would post the offering document. It's in the market for 2 weeks. And then we price the bonds at that 2-week period. And then they close 1 week after that. So it's kind of a 3-week period, but only 2 weeks for marketing. So if we submitted a preliminary limited offering memorandum to the council with that 60-day period, when we went to then market the bonds, that data would no longer be relevant for investors. And so we would have to then update the document again. And then, it's unclear if that would then no longer be a preliminary, the right offering document to share with the council. So I think that's where it's a little bit unclear. There are several municipalities where you present a 60-day notice, but that's, preliminary information. So it's our financing plan. It's what was already presented to the council. That's pretty standard, where we're providing that and, can receive comment for, anywhere from 45 to 60 days.
Thank you. That's helpful.
No problem.
Councilmember Madera.
Yeah, I just got a couple questions. I think one's for Legato, and then one might be for our internal staff. So when can we expect the document?
So if you wanted a final preliminary, like the posted offering document, Shelby, can you provide a comment on the schedule for when that's scheduled to post, which really depends on, go ahead.
Yeah, so currently we do have a draft PLOM, preliminary limited offer memorandum. We have a draft PLOM, and comments have been circulated from everybody that's involved. So if the council wanted to review a draft PLOM, we do have that. There is a lot of back and forth that occurs as we kind of go through roughly 3 to 4 drafts of that offering document before it posts. At this point, we are, if everything goes as scheduled, we would post May 11th. We would price then on May 25th, and we would close on June 2nd. So we do have, we would be able to go to market sometime within the next 30 to 40 days in terms of posting and pricing.
Then for our staff, is this something that we've had to deal with? I can't recall ever,
This requirement is in only a handful, and that's a very small hand of service plans in the city at this point. It is a new creation and has not been implemented. And so it was negotiated with new service plans as far as giving additional information, but I think the terminology may not clearly capture exactly, obviously, what the market can provide. I believe it speaks about a preliminary official statement or a prospectus. And so the terms that the district has provided now may satisfy that requirement. One of the other issues, though, is the opinion of bond counsel that would be provided that the debt offering is compliant with the service plan is another item that would be waived by this. But I believe that the district has indicated could be provided as well. And so if council wanted to retain that requirement, you could approve the resolution with an amendment to continue the requirement of having a bond counsel opinion within a certain number of days, but I think 60 days wouldn't meet their time frame.
And I'll just follow up on that bond counsel comment. The districts have engaged, or I should say the authority has engaged Ballard Spahr, a nationally recognized bond counsel firm, who will provide an opinion that the debt issuance is in compliance with the service plan. We can provide you a draft of that opinion this week if you'd like. We can't provide you a final opinion until we have final pricing information, and we can't provide you a final opinion and then wait 60 days. So there is a bit of a timing snafu.
And if I can, sorry to jump in again, the timing concept and the opinion was, although the council doesn't have the ability to modify the pricing or disapprove it, if the council felt that it was out of compliance with the service plan, could potentially take action judicially to try and stop the debt offering, which would be something of a dramatic step for sure. But having the bond counsel opinion was meant to alleviate that concern for both parties, to kind of have that third party opinion that the service plan was being complied with.
Yeah, thank you for that. That was going to be my next question. I would like to see the bond counsel opinion on that. And maybe for Mr. Sheasley, is this something that we're going to have to look into about possibly modifying for the 60-day requirement?
Yes, I think we'll see these requests come up more and more frequently that we'll need to clarify this as to when things can be provided. I think we'll want an opinion from the bond counsel that if, as it's currently proposed, it meets the service plan. I think we'd want that official opinion if possible. And so we can talk about that afterwards. But yes, I think we'll see these requests come up, and in any future service plans, we'll address this provision.
Thank you.
Any other questions from council? Councilmember Ellen Thomas.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentations, but I'm not sure, Robert or Jason, if this is a question for one of you guys, but has the staff bypassed this 60 days period for any other companies?
This is the first time that we've been presented with a debt issuance or refinancing that is subject to this requirement. I think there are only 2 service plans where this is included, unless it was in the reunion service plans that got approved in 2019 as well. I don't believe it's in those. So I think this is only in 2 service plans currently.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Madera.
Sorry about that.
Any other questions for staff or for the applicant's representative regarding this item? Seeing none, I'm looking for a motion and a second to approve resolution 2021-31 waiver of service plan requirement relating to debt issuance for Legato Metropolitan District. Councilmember Grimes.
So moved.
Councilmember Madera.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve resolution 2021-31. Is there any discussion?
Mayor, may I recommend that it be amended to not waive the bond, that the waiver still require the submission of the bond counsel opinion prior to the issuance.
Councilmember Grimes, will you amend your motion to include the verbiage stated by the city attorney?
Yes.
Thank you. And Councilmember Madera, will you second that amended motion?
Yep.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second to adopt resolution 2021-31 as amended to include the requirement to still submit the opinion of the bond counsel, just not within the 60-day timeframe. Is there any discussion on that? Seeing none, will the city clerk please read the title?
Resolution 2021-31, a resolution granting waiver of service plan requirement relating to debt issuance for Legato Metropolitan District numbers 1 through 7.
Thank you. And we will do a voice vote. Please use your physical hands in the chat window so your vote can be counted. And that is going to pass unanimously 9-0. Next, we move on to administrative council business. First up, we have an extension of the tolling agreement. Looking for a motion and a second to authorize the city attorney to execute a 6-month extension of the tolling agreement in the packet. Mayor Pro Tem.
So moved.
Councilmember Madera.
Second.
Is there any discussion regarding this request? Seeing none, we'll do a voice vote. Please use physical hands in the chat window. And that is going to pass unanimously 9-0. This time, I'd like to ask, do any council members have any administrative council business that they would like to discuss? Councilmember Noble.
I just wanted to note that the SEP is being voted on at the moment, and there will be a decision tonight among the 8 finalists for the 2.6 million that was part of the fines levied against Suncor. That vote has not been finalized at the moment, but it is, they're voting as I speak. Commerce City, I don't believe, is one of the 8, by the way. However, there are lots of great proposals, and I know Commerce City will support whatever proposal wins.
Thank you for that. Councilmember Hurst.
Yeah, I wanted to make a comment on public comment tonight. You know, I think a good point was risen about intent of that legislation, at least from my understanding. And, you know, I think we either need to do one of two things. We need to either educate more on opportunities to avoid that situation, such as we talked about free permits, or consider kind of those impacts on small businesses that we discussed during the debate of this, you know, and try to make a change. And I know when we passed this, we talked about several of us talked about this isn't going to be perfect. And we, we debated for quite some time on the issue, and we kind of viewed that as, you know, ever changing and ever growing, trying to continue to adapt to our citizens' needs and wishes and try to find the best legislative path forward. So, you know, I really don't think that this was our intent to go after a business like this. And there's no way, you know, a police officer on scene can understand all of the details of the situation either. With an expectation, I think, you know, obviously you could track them down, but for a parking ticket, I'm not sure that's worth all of that. And so I just want us to consider that comment. I thought it was, you know, brought up that this is a possibility during debate of the legislation, and it's happened pretty quickly after. And so, you know, I understand all of our intent to try to improve, you know, citywide parking problems, but I also understood our intent is to not go after businesses like this. And so I just want to request that we put our heads together and try to think of a path forward to make it a more well-rounded law.
Councilmember Noble.
Thank you. Thanks for bringing that up, Councilmember Hurst. it's my understanding that it's 48 hours, that you can have a vehicle for 48 hours. And part of the reason, or a big part of the reason that we did this rule is because we got complaints from residents. And so we don't know whether it was a neighbor who made the complaint that led to the ticket. If it was within the 48 hours, and it sounds from the description like it was, then it would seem that the ticket would be dismissed. Our son has 2 food trucks and lives in Commerce City, and keeps his food trucks in a lot, and hasn't had an issue. I have talked to him about this previously when we were working on this legislation, if there was something that I should know about his kind of business. And so the details are tricky, but at the same time, we were responding to residents who were having an issue with vehicles that were parked in their neighborhoods, in their residential neighborhoods. So we do have to balance this, and that's the question. Where do we find the balance? Whether it's all of the complaints that we received prior to this, or the unfortunate incident that has occurred that sounds like the ticket should be dismissed because it was within the 48 hours as it is.
That 48 hours is for RVs to be parked out there for loading and unloading, but did not apply to food trucks or other vehicles that were deemed large size. Those
Okay.
weren't in the 48-hour window.
So then the question would be, why would a food truck be parked at a home, I guess?
Yeah, in this case, he brought it home so that a plumber could do work on the food truck at his house. Any other comments, Councilmember Noble? Thank you.
No.
Thank you. Any other administrative council business? Councilmember Grimes?
Sorry, actually mine is for just for council reports.
All right. Seeing no other request for administrative council business, we'll move into reports. Mr. Tinklenberg.
Thank you, Mayor. Several items. Just wanted to give you an update on a variety of these items. For the 2022 work plan, we have the meeting scheduled for May 4, and as an introduction to that meeting, we have staff working on providing some sample targets that would go with those 3 goals, assuming that those are the 3 goals that council settles on. And even not, they still can serve as examples of the type of targets that we would try to achieve. So we're working on those, and we'll provide those. American Rescue Plan, we continue to prepare a menu of projects for you to take a look at and choose from. We are tentatively shooting for May 10, but we just had a change in schedule from an outside company, so there may be we may need to shift that a little bit in order to accommodate that change in schedule. In terms of community development, just to let you know, the 104th Joliet project that's being proposed by Trammell Crow, that subdivision was posted for approval, and the deadline on that is April 27. For the comprehensive plan, staff will schedule meetings with individual council members to discuss feedback and thoughts on the comprehensive plan. So don't be surprised when you see an invitation for that. And then land use cases, we're still at 179, which is the highest we've had. For the last time I reported on the housing consortium, it's actually called HOME, H-O-M-E, all caps, which is an acronym. And the proposal to join with Adams County will be brought to you in May. So that will, right now, staff is working together with Adams County to hash out those details. And then, as I mentioned earlier, for the emergency rental assistance, that had a soft launch on March 29. And we already have 50 applications that are under review. So significant interest and demand for that program. Community relations, we're getting the word out on the weeds ordinance that was passed. And economic development, just a reminder that the Paycheck Protection Program was extended by Congress to May 31. So we have a month and a half left on that program. For finance, they're working on the reappropriation documents that will go to staff to bring that to City Council in terms of recommendations for appropriations that started in 2020 and items were not finished and need to be carried over into 2021. Plus, there have been new items that have come up since then that we will also be bringing to you for your consideration. Human Relations has been working on the veterans internships. And so they have a concept that they've presented to the leadership team. And Human Relations will serve as the initial project manager. In other words, they're going to be the lead off in using the program. So they're their own guinea pigs. And we will be presenting to City Council next week about that program. So just so for your awareness. And then Public Works, several items. The 104th Avenue signals, slight delay. So we anticipate those signals at Idalia and Walden will be finished in May. One of them the first week of May and the other one a little later again. And then following that, those signals on 104th Avenue will be looked at for coordinating for the entire length. And I just said Human Relations instead of saying Human Resources. Sorry about that. Pardon me. The Perlmutter earmarks, or Congress's earmarks actually, but Representative Perlmutter invited us to provide ideas for him to advance. And one of the ideas was the interchange at US 85 and 120th Avenue. And his office notified Adams County that he has obtained $5 million for that project. So that will go towards advancing the design and right-of-way acquisition. So it's pre-construction work that will continue to move on and implement. And then RAISE, R-A-I-S-E, another acronym from U.S. Department of what is it called? I have to defer to Councilmember Hurst, but Highway Administration, FHA, is that right?
Federal Highway Administration, FHWA.
Yeah, thank you. That's the new name for what used to be called the Build Grant and what was previously known as the Tiger Grants. So new administration, new acronym for the same program. So our engineering division is working on a grant application for 88th Avenue through that program, and that will be going in sometime fairly soon. And then the 112th Avenue Bridge replacement, we're waiting on FHWA approval so that we can advertise that project. In other words, advertise for bids. So that's the status. Just wanted to give you those updates. Thank you very much.
Thanks, sir. A couple weeks ago, we were having a meeting and a large lightning strike occurred somewhere up here in the northern area. And I think that it scrambled some of the controllers on some of the lights on 104th. I know the one at 104th and Landmark is not operating the way it's supposed to. It's reverted back to the walking function. And then the flashing yellow light is weird. It'll actually have a red light and sits there and traffic isn't doing what it normally does. So I don't know if that strike scrambled the controllers there, but if W&L could go out there and take a look at some of those lights and make sure they're functioning the way they're supposed to, that would be appreciated. Mr. Sheasley.
Thank you. Just a brief item tonight. the recent change in public health orders and restrictions on operations mean that restaurants can operate at 100% capacity in Adams County under the level blue restriction, I believe. However, it has a 6-foot distancing requirement. The city has twice now enacted the third-party food delivery fee limits, but I am required to bring back an ordinance repealing those when restaurants are able to operate at 100% capacity. Given that there is still a 6-foot distancing requirement and some restaurants might not be able to operate at their 100% capacity, I would not intend to bring that ordinance repealing it back now, but I wanted to make sure council was comfortable with waiting on that. So lots of nods. I'm good. Thank you all very much. That's it.
Yeah, do any council members wish to make a report at this time? Councilmember Noble?
I'm sorry, this is kind of it's not exactly a report. It might fall under administrative council business. I'm not sure where it falls, but Mr. Tinklenberg, you mentioned earlier this evening about the Economic Development Committee, and I was going to raise it, but I was waiting until you discussed it during council reports. You were going to ask for people who wanted to participate in it. And I wanted to have that conversation because that's been something that I've been anxious to see happen ever since the mayor brought it up in September.
Thank you for reminding me. That was gnawing at the back of my mind that I was forgetting something. And yes, I meant to bring it up in the admin business portion. And that is basically who among the full body wants to participate in that committee, subcommittee, whatever we're going to call it.
I'll leave my hand up.
Looks like you're going to be Councilmember Noble, Councilmember Grimes, Councilmember Hurst, Councilmember Wadiola, Councilmember Alan Thomas, and myself, and Mayor Pro Tem. And Councilmember Smith, are you in there as well? No? Okay. Did you get all those?
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Councilmember Grimes?
Thank you, Mayor. This past weekend, well, let me start by saying I think everybody saw communication from Roger last week about the COVID vaccine site at Dick's Sporting Goods Park this past weekend. That event was targeted at communities and people of color. And they were estimating at the end of my shift on Saturday that they had reached, in that clinic alone, 80% of the people coming through were Latino. And that was very exciting. Also, at the end of that clinic, they had reached close to 5,000 vaccines administered. And so that was a huge success. Councilmember Noble and I both volunteered, and I found it to be quite rewarding, really, really fun to be down on the ground, boots on the ground, interacting with people who are excited to take a step into getting back to normal life. So that was really great. Denver Health also asked me to partner with them on additional vaccines to be offered. They are really trying to reach right into the communities, to the people, not necessarily through mass vaccine sites, but 100 at a time. And so I committed to signing up 100 people from Commerce City to be at a vaccine clinic this Thursday at the Montbello Rec Center. And as a part of that sign up, I went to the core city yesterday and knocked on doors and talked to people and signed up as many as I could. And I also will be at the Eagle Point Rec Center tomorrow evening from 5 until 8. So if anybody watching or anyone on council knows of people who are still looking, please send them my direction. I just want to say I'm very much of the stance, if you want a vaccine, great. If you don't want one, great. But I want to make sure that the people that want one know where to go to ask to sign up. So very excited to be part of that, and appreciate any help pointing people my direction if you know of them.
Thank you. Any other council members wishing to make a report? Councilmember Noble?
Yeah, I just want to thank Councilmember Grimes for bringing this to our attention. It really was amazing to see all the cars that were coming through and all the people who were getting vaccinated. So thank you so much. And thank you for continuing this effort. It's critically important. Thank you.
Seeing no other requests to make a report, participated in the second of a two-part series of anchor institutions as far as helping them help communities of color, and was pretty informative, and they really focused a lot on Cleveland and the work that they did in economic development in order to have these anchor institutions that were going to basically create an economic development package that really just kind of bolstered the community as a whole. So very informative, and appreciate everybody from the Metro Mayor Caucus to Mayor Hancock and everybody else that put that together for us. Seeing that is the end of our items that we have. Next up is an executive session. Looking for a motion and a second to enter into executive session. Councilmember Grimes.
So moved.
Mayor Pro Tem.
I'll second that.
Have a motion and a second to enter into an executive session regarding the city manager recruitment pursuant to CRS 24-6-402 parentheses 4 parentheses E and F for the purposes of discussing personnel matters relating to the interim city manager and determining negotiating positions and instructing negotiators on matters that may be subject to negotiations concerning the contract for the city manager. Is there any discussion? Seeing no request for discussion, we'll do a voice vote. Please use your physical hands in the chat window. And that's going to pass 9-0. City attorney has already circulated a Zoom link. It is a separate Zoom link than the one that we used for the executive session for the URA meeting earlier this evening. So please make sure you click on the correct executive session. Once that session has concluded, we'll return to this Zoom webinar to conclude our business and adjourn to the ECAG-ERA-GID joint meeting. See you there. All right, looks like everybody is back from the executive session. The city council has decided to offer a permanent position as city manager to our current interim city manager, Roger Tinklenberg. We have agreed on salary and other details of that, and we'll vote on a resolution to make this decision final and permanent on the May 3rd city council meeting. There being no more business to go for, we are adjourned. We have a ECR, AGID, and an ERA GID joint meeting that will convene at 10:55 p.m. this evening. So we'll see you at 10:55 p.m. for those that want to stick around and see that meeting. Other than that, have a great night, have a good week, and we'll see you next week. Yes, sir.
Mayor, as council can, I understand, leave, to the extent there won't be a quorum for that meeting, we can see if council, it's my understanding council members won't be available at that time. So if you just wanted to identify that there would not be a quorum now so that you and staff members wouldn't have to stick around to do that, I think that would be appropriate. Sorry.
Okay, if that's acceptable.
I think that works.
Okay, great. Unfortunately, there will not be a quorum for the 10:55 joint meeting between the ECA GID and ERA GID meeting. So that meeting agenda will be moved to a special meeting of both GIDs that'll take place after the April 26th study session. That being said, have a good night. Have a good week. Good night.